Welcome to the H.I.P podcast, where we believe the real experts on healing are those who've lived it. I'm Shaya, director of the H.I.P Counseling Center, and on this show, we give voice to the incredible journeys of those who've navigated attachment challenges and complex trauma. Here, you'll hear from clients of therapy themselves about what truly helped them and how they found their path to healing. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to the H.I.P podcast. Today's episode is about what it can feel like to get intensely attached to someone and not really understand why, and how that can show up in ways that can feel confusing, overwhelming, and sometimes even a little scary, especially when it happens in therapy. Before we start, I just want to share that our guest, Leah, is not her real name, and her voice has been altered to protect her privacy. That was a very intentional choice so that this story could be shared safely, because there are a lot of experiences like this that people carry alone with a lot of confusion and often a lot of shame, and don't always feel like they have a place to talk about them openly. And part of what we're trying to create here is a space where those stories can be shared safely. Leah wanted to share her experiences so that others might have more awareness and maybe recognize things that are very hard to see when you're inside of it, especially when there's a strong need for connection. In this conversation, we talk about attachment, shame, and how these dynamics can show up in relationships, including in therapy, and what it can look like when boundaries start to become unclear. I am so grateful that Leah was willing to share her story. Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the H.I.P podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. Leah is here to join us and share a very unique story of attachment, challenge, is very passionate about spreading her story, her message to help anybody that's struggling. We are so grateful that she's here today. So without further ado, Leah, how about you introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm Leah.
Your attachment challenges have brought you to some situations that have been really complex and complicated, and there's some information that you wish you would have had, or would have had some awareness. Maybe is better put. You wish you would have had some more awareness around some things. Feel free to share whatever feels okay.
Okay. So I'm just a regular person. I grew up in a small town, one of many siblings, and I think my childhood was not that much different from a lot of people's. Two parents loved me very much. I did leave home at a young age for high school, and I think that some of my attachment challenges actually started when I went away for camp, realizing like I had this kind of like conflicting thing inside of me. Like I was very independent, like just to do a lot of things on my own. I made friends. But then there was another part of me that was like would latch on. And I think I noticed it for the first time when I went away to camp. So I was out of my home environment and I met somebody. And then after camp, I used to call it like obsessive. Like I would be obsessed with them. Like I would want to call them all the time and talk to them all the time. And then fast forward when I went away to high school, I always had one person who I was kind of attached to, but then the rest of my life was like super independent. I was away from home, so I kind of had to be in a certain sense independent, but it was like I didn't need anything from anyone. Even the people that I was closest to, like, always kept a little bit of a distance from, except for the one person that I was attached to. And
Yes. So I just wanted to just summarize, if I'm getting it right, that things were pretty smooth. And then you're going away to camp. And in camp, you start to notice that even though you're highly independent and tend to not really need people, but there's always this one person that you attach very, very strongly to. I think you called it obsessive, in a very obsessive way, feeling like you always need to be talking to them and things like that. Am I getting that right?
yes.
Yes. When you're starting to notice that, can I ask what you were feeling when you were noticing that?
So at the time, I think I just felt like, what's wrong with me? Like, I am so independent. Like, why am I acting this way? Or why do I feel this way? And I kind of just like concluded, like, oh, I'm just kind of messed up. And that was sort of something that I kind of ended up believing about myself. Like, I had kind of a rocky high school situation. So I'm like, oh, I'm just messed up from that. And like, I just need someone to talk to about, like being in so many different high schools. And yeah, I didn't know what it was. So I was just like, oh, it just internalized it.
Hmm. So it felt very off to you to need someone that much. right? And you're trying to make sense out of like, why does this part of me need someone this much? Must be I'm just going through some really hard times. So that's the reason why I need someone this much.
Right.
Okay. And how does that feel when you're concluding that? Because you use words like
Mm,
messed up.
at the time or now?
Well, maybe both. What was it like at the time? How do you look at it now?
At the time, it felt very disturbing. Like, I couldn't figure out why I was like that. And I didn't even know what that was. It was just like this need that, like, I couldn't understand.
Yeah. And
And
it was also problematic because you were so independent.
right, exactly. I don't want to be like that. I was like, this is not who I am. I think, like, I would overcompensate. Like, I would get into trouble and I would, like, particularly in school, like, I would just make a lot of trouble. I was kicked out a bunch of times. And obviously now, like, as an adult looking back, it was a cry for help and a need that I wasn't, getting met. But I didn't even know what it was. So how could people around me know that?
Yeah, of course. Of course. So it's just confusion, shame at the time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Then you were saying you were transitioning to high school and what that was like for you, I think.
So I think that what ended up happening was I would go to any lengths to get this need. And obviously, this wasn't like a conscious thing, but I think some of the things that I would do or the relationships that I ended up in were just to fill this need, which now I know was just like an attachment.
Yeah. Tell us more. Tell us more about what this need is all about. At least now it sounds like you have some clarity and you can look back and say, oh, I needed this. So what's that attachment need that you think you needed?
I mean, knowing what I know now, I think it was just connection and attention.
So since you were highly independent, or it sounds like you needed to be highly independent potentially, without realizing why it was set up that way inside your system. But you were highly independent, but you were also starving from connection. And you needed that connection at the same time. You now can say being that independent is something that wouldn't have worked. And you really needed connection as well. And you were running really empty. So really craving that in a very intense way.
Right.
Is that accurate?
And I think, yeah, definitely. And I think that being independent was like so important to me that I would almost like deprive myself of the like connection and attachment that is healthy, which made everything worse. And, be like, how are things or how are you? And I'd be like, yeah, everything's totally fine. Like, I don't need anything. I'm good. Um, and then like an hour later, I would, be talking after lights out or like making noise or just something. I think that was just like it could have been prevented, I guess.
Yeah. How do you think that could have been prevented?
I think if I had more awareness of like what it was going on inside me and more understanding and less like, judgment and shame around it, then I think it would be easier to access or give it to myself in whatever way.
Right. So this sort of connection you could give to yourself or from other people in a connected way. But it seems like in your system, there was a lot of shame around needing connection, and being highly independent was something that you were celebrating in some way.
Right.
Got it. And then when you're feeling disconnected, alone, lonely, you're kind of like seeking out attention in other ways, which is getting you into trouble.
Correct.
Okay. I'm glad I got it. Okay. So take us to the next step of the journey.
So once I was in high school and I was away from home and trying to like figure all this out, I ended up in a situation with a teacher that was just very unhealthy. And like I look back now and just think about how like having these attachment, I call them issues, but how it manifested and how like if there was more awareness that maybe I wouldn't have to like sacrifice certain things like healthy boundaries or just by knowing like okay, this is an attachment thing. And, for me, it was like I had to sacrifice what I knew was wrong because I needed that connection.
Okay. So I think I'm hearing you say that you had something inside you that sensed that something was off with these boundaries or loose boundaries. But at the same time, you were craving that connection so strong that, and you couldn't frame this as something that's problematic necessarily, even though there's some part of you that can sense that something might be off here. Am I getting that right?
Right,
And if you would have known what healthy boundaries look like or what you were seeking out and why you might have been seeking it out, if someone would have been able to be with you, help you understand what was happening, then you would have been able to trust your sense.
right,
Yeah. I mean, that is so tricky because you're craving that connection so strong and that pull is so powerful when someone's giving it to you, even if it's with these unhealthy boundaries.
right,
And of course, you're not going to trust how you feel and just go for it because that's what you need.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
But you don't
So
know
tell
any
us
of
what
that,
happens.
and like you don't,
Yeah.
or I didn't know any of that in the time in the moment. So yeah, it just gets kind of tricky.
Like you didn't know that there's this thing called boundaries. There's this thing called healthy boundaries. There's a way that like a relationship dynamic should look between different types of relationships, a teacher to student, peers, and you didn't have that like clear reference point for yourself since you've been so independent, maybe, or you haven't been surrounded by it.
No, so I think that I did. I think that what happens is like I became so attached, and like I felt like almost like I can't live without this. So I have to like let go of everything else, even though I know, like the fact that I had to hide, let's say, this relationship from my friends or my parents obviously shows that I knew something wasn't right, but it was like almost like I need that so much that I'm willing to let go of everything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And everything else is your authenticity, like your feelings, your safety. That's what you have to let go of in order to get this connection.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That's a very typical process when we struggle with attachment, where we're going to start fragmenting from ourselves in order to get the connection that we need. So we might deviate a lot from our authenticity and become some version of ourselves that gets that connection in the way that we think we need or the way that we have no choice around necessarily. And we just go for it. And we do lose ourselves. So, yeah, that definitely resonates.
I think like then I ended up, it just like perpetuated the whole feeling of like something's wrong with me. What is wrong with me? Why can't I just forget about this person and just like move on and let go? And like, why does, why do they take up so much space in my head? Like, there's a lot of questions that are just, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah. And also there's no one to talk to about it, it sounds like. It's very secretive. It's something that only you're dealing with. It's very intense, this relationship, it sounds like. The energy is very intense. Uh, it sounds like it's obsessive. It's occupying your mind, your feelings for much of the time. And you're so consumed by this and looking for how to make this stop, but you can't really talk to anyone. So it's this big secret, which probably I imagine fuels the shame, and the shame is just growing.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow, that's like such a lonely, lonely place, especially at such a young age.
Yeah. But, I learned to sort of like disconnect. And like when I'm with my friends, I don't have that life, but when I'm with in that life, then I don't have my friends. Like it was just a very, like two different worlds. And that pattern
Wow.
continued in my life.
Wow. So you're like totally splitting off into like different, let's call them parts, I guess. Like there's the part of you that can socialize, that can be with friends, but then we have to completely disconnect from the other relationships that we have. And then when we're with this other person with the intensity, that's all consuming as well.
Right. And like some of
So
my
then you
friends
said
knew
that's
that
a,
I
yeah, go
had,
ahead.
let's say, relationships with like that teacher. And sometimes they would make comments like, oh, that's weird, or, but like nobody really thought anything of it because I didn't really make anything of it, to them.
Yeah. So it was something that was known, but it was also maybe the intensity of it you didn't make known to them, or the details of what's happening in the relationship, maybe. Yeah. And you said that's a pattern that tended to repeat itself afterwards.
Yes. So once I was able to kind of like break away from the relationship with the teacher, I had a lot of things obviously like left over from the relationship and from before that I, didn't even know about. So I had been to different therapists, but I never really like stayed in therapy. Some of the therapists that I went to, I was forced to go to, which doesn't usually
Yeah,
end well.
totally. We're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So when you had been to therapists, about this issue. You had been to therapists even earlier in your life.
I think the first time I went was maybe when I got kicked out of school, but then the second time, this was all in high school. But then the second time I went, um, it was to deal with even though I was in the relationship with this teacher, the principal of the school recommended that I go to therapy or told my parents I had to go to therapy. So when I was like in therapy and with this therapist, I did speak about what was going on with the teacher, but I didn't stay with that therapist for very long.
Got it. And you weren't going to the therapist to deal with this relationship. You were going for the general things that were going on, and it was just something that was coming up.
Right. I mean, I did mention it, and then I think I didn't see her for long, but I think what ended up happening was the therapist kind of scared me. Like this was
Oh,
like a teacher and a student, and it's not legal and whatever, and certain boundaries, and
yeah. Like the therapist was already getting involved and getting alarmed about this relationship, and you started to realize that this they might do something about it. And there were these parts of you that obviously would be very scared by that, parts of you that maybe wanted to keep this relationship, and that scared you.
right.
And that's why you stopped going to them?
Yeah.
Hmm. Wow, that's a really hard spot.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that actual like therapy.
Okay, there wasn't like a lot of therapy going on. It was short. It was kind of like reporting back, or okay,
Yeah. Like I think I had to go like 3 times. I ended up maybe going 4 times.
okay, and it was mandated, so you weren't like fully leaning into it either.
Right.
Hmm. Okay, so what happens next?
So then um I go to another school, and I think kind of halfway through the year there was somebody in the school that said, there's a really good therapist, like maybe you should try them. Because I was like missing classes and making trouble, and um the therapist had written a book, so I read the book and I was like, you know what, okay, like I'll go. But this was really like something that I had wanted and I was excited about it. And so I went. It ended up taking me into like a whole another journey. And I went thinking like, okay, I'm gonna deal with this issue of like these obsessions and like what happened with the teacher, or, just like my history of just being like so independent and not needing anyone at all, and then just being like obsessive and so attached. And then obviously I ended up getting attached to the therapist.
Which could I just slow that down just for a second? So first of all, you're describing a pattern of disorganized attachment, just to put language to it, which is a very common way that people attach. And I heard you say that I got very attached to the therapist. And I just want to say that that's completely normal, right? That a person would get attached to the therapist. And I think there's a lot of shame around that too, that like I'm attaching to my therapist. I feel like I need them or that I want to be with them, in close proximity a lot. And that's something that sometimes brings up a lot of shame. And maybe there's a lot of internal judgment and external judgment around that from people. And I just want to put out here for anybody who's struggling with that. This is so, so typical, so normal, so expected, and exactly what therapy is supposed to help with. And there's no shame in feeling like you want to attach to your therapist. There's It's totally normal to attach to your therapist, and there's a safe and healthy way to attach to your therapist. So that's totally okay. Now I imagine that that didn't go so smoothly for you. So
Thank you. So, yeah, so that ended up being a very bad situation. Um, I think like the important thing about that situation is that because it was a therapist, I think I felt that whatever I was feeling about whatever was happening, like obviously they knew more because they were a therapist. And so I had to believe their word and I had to, just, I guess, go with whatever they said. Um, but I also feel like having these attachment, like the disorganized attachment, there's like a part of me that felt like I could not like live without them. And then because I felt like that, that ended up being like a point in which they sort of, I don't know what the word is, like they use that like you need this. You can't live without this. And I know that this circumstance is different, but I do feel like it's easy to fall into circumstances when you have this type of attachment where you feel like you can't like live without the person that you're attached to.
yeah, for sure. So if I could just reflect a little bit on what you're saying, there is the vulnerable state that you're in as a client of therapy, and you're going in specifically for help with this. And you are not really sure, like, what's up with you? Why do I feel this way? Why do I have this pull to be independent, but at the same time feel really, really intense in relationships and like I can't live without them? And it's quite confusing. And you're going to this professional who holds a lot of power, a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise. And obviously, you're just going to show up there and expect to get helped. Or maybe you're not sure if you could be helped, but at least they're in the position of power and you're the one feeling, if I could say, probably kind of weak or vulnerable. And it's up to them to help you. And whatever they say, you're going to potentially just go along with because they're the one who's helping you and you need them to help. So I think that when you were in that position, also having the part of the disorganized attachment, which is the anxious part, which is the one who feels like I can't live without this person. So that was something that this person was taking advantage of because they knew that you couldn't live without them.
Right.
Yeah. And I imagine there's maybe added layers of shame or just complexity because why do I feel this way when I've been so independent and been so okay on my own at the same time? So it can be even more confusing or dysregulating, maybe.
Yeah. And I think the shame was so intense that I had to completely make like a cover of who I really was. And like if somebody in my life right now would be listening to this, I think they would be like completely shocked. Like because the way I show up is like again, like I can, overly independent, overly capable, overly like it's like a over it's I think just like an overcompensation at this point, but it's like I don't want anyone to see that, like, maybe I have needs or I need help, or even to this day, it's something that I struggle with. But,
Mhm.
um, yeah. I mean, obviously, nobody goes around like flaunting their attachment issues, but
Yeah. So you're saying that your avoidant parts tend to be what people see most often, right? Is the highly capable, highly independent, not showing or expressing these needs that you have. But you also have been in relationships where that has come out very, very strong as well. So it's not the classic avoidant. It's really this mix, which we call disorganized or fearful avoidant, where we have the parts that know how to just be independent and not need anyone. And also we have the other side, the opposite, where we really feel very, very needy and like we can't live without this person. So this push and pull is going on. Yeah. So I know also like what happens typically with this presentation is like therapy, of course, can become very intense. I mean, it's an attachment relationship and all of these attachment dynamics are going to get activated. So I'm just curious if you could name, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but did you have also with this therapist the parts of you that were trying to not need them at all? Was it the mix, or were you totally sucked into the I need them and I can't live without them?
So I think I fluctuated. Like I ended up being staying with this therapist for a while. I think there were times where I was like, I don't need this, I'm fine. And I think I think with this circumstance, it might have been a little different just because of how unhealthy it was. But I think the times that I did try to be like, no, like I'm fine, he was like, no, you're not fine, you need this. And like, wouldn't really even allow me to go there.
Okay, so there was this like setup that they were doing that was sort of facilitating the dependency. Like you can't, like also you getting the messaging like you can't live without me.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you're bringing this up, and I want to, if I could just take a moment here to really put out there that that's a massive red flag, right? That even when we're struggling with attachment needs, and even when we legitimately have parts of ourselves that have that type of need, which is a young part of us, a very young part that really truly is very dependent potentially. But for a therapist to tell the overall system, like, hi, person, hi, client, uh, you can't survive without me. I need you to hear that. I need you to know that. That's a massive, massive red flag. Nobody should be telling a client that they can't live without them.
Even in subtle ways, like I think, yeah, 1,000%. But I think it's also like important to know what like the subtleties around it are as well. Because even if they don't come out and say like, "Oh, you can't live without me," there are certain messages I think that were being given to me in the beginning, like just from the start, that was like, "You need this," and like you need, your the message was again like you are so messed up, you have so much trauma, like you need this therapy so badly. I think because that was already a message that I was telling myself, it was so easy to believe. It was coming from this big, powerful therapist. And I think that was like the start of that. Like, you can't live without me.
Yeah. So I think there's a nuance here that I want to make sure we're being clear and thoughtful about. And I want to make sure I'm really understanding what you're saying. Because on the one hand, it's something that really you could have benefited from in a huge way. You did just come from this very chaotic relationship with your teacher and all the other stuff that you were grappling with at the time. And therapy was something that was recommended. And would you agree was something that really you might have needed at the time? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
At the same time, there's something about the flavor of how this therapist is giving you that message that you're raising a flag and saying that was problematic. Could you identify, like, if a therapist said to you, listen, you've been through all this trauma, this is something so significant, it makes sense why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and I know how to help you, would that have raised the flag for you?
No, not necessarily.
So, could you identify the difference in what you experienced as, which we can now say is unhealthy, versus like a therapist who's like confident that you need help and that they know how?
Yeah. So I think probably the first thing that I would identify as like being red flag for this particular situation was I was in the middle of a program at school, and things were not working out with my living situation. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna leave the program and move back home for a little bit to just like figure things out. And he was like, no, don't leave the program. You have to stay. So I did. I stayed. And then eventually, so I think that was like the first thing. Like, I think if I decided something that was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for me, like, I don't like where I'm living, I'm not happy, I'm going to make this change. Like, instead of telling me, like, no, don't move away from me, like, if it
Oh,
was a
from
healthy therapist,
sorry to cut
which,
you off. Just he was saying, "Don't move away from me." He was saying it
so
like that in that kind of way.
he didn't frame it like that, but like that
Okay,
ended up
that's the
being what
feeling you got.
the deal was. Like, he said, like, no, you're in the middle of a program, you shouldn't leave it. Now, again, like, I guess someone could interpret that as like, oh, they're just encouraging me to finish what I started. But it felt very pushy of like his opinion,
Okay,
or
so
like
he's
what he wanted
inserting
me to
his
do.
opinion. what he wants you to do, not necessarily supporting you in getting your own clarity, but more like, here's what you need to do.
Right. Or like different things where he'd be like, you need to see me. It's confusing because, like, after this whole therapist situation ended, I did see another therapist who was like, no, you do need to come in more than once a week. Like, you need more support. And that was healthy and that was necessary. And so, but the difference when he said it was there was like a big lack of boundary. It was like, stay after session and you can take a rest on my couch, or it started out with like little things like that, just kind of pushing the boundary a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then it, I imagine, just magnified into much more problematic things over time.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it was something that was like, it was a very overwhelming session, you might need a few minutes, you know, to rest. That's not what we're calling out here. It's more like looping you into being around him more and more and more, which wasn't necessarily best for you and couldn't be explained as this is good for you, truly, like objectively good for you. But really was just some of whatever was going on for him there that was
Yeah. And
facilitating that.
also making me feel dependent, like you need this and you need to stay here and you need to, do the things that I say you need, and giving me messages that and in the beginning, I like fought back on it. It wasn't like, oh yeah, okay, I'm just gonna take what you say and run with it. It was like, but what about this? And like, he told me I have a certain diagnosis, and I was like, but it doesn't resonate. Like, I don't feel this about that diagnosis, and I don't feel that about the diagnosis. Like, no, there's always an answer for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I didn't realize what was happening. To me, it was like, oh, he's just trying to help me. He really cares about me, and like he's gonna help me.
Mm-hmm. So the questions that you were bringing were shut down in a way. It sounds like you were sharing your voice, you were sharing some concerns, but you were kind of like being put in a position where like he knows better and this is the truth and this is the way it is. And then you're the parts of you that were feeling like, okay, he's the professional, he's the expert, he knows better. And this is coming from a caring place, would just like kind of shut down the pushback. That is so tricky. So tricky. Because you like brought your voice up, you like had the courage to share, but then you're like, okay, maybe he knows better. And you truly don't know. So you're just kind of stuck there. Yeah. So it's probably many of these type of interactions that are going on over time.
Yeah. And what happened was I ended up becoming like the obsessive part of me, or the attached part of me, like became so much worse. Like worse than I had ever been in any other relationship. Where it was just like it was creating this like dynamic where like I would be so bad off that I actually would really need him. You know? That if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That's what happens sometimes, right? Because we have this strong need for the person. Now, if the person on the other side of you also is not secure and healthy and steady, right? They may have the need for you to need them, right? Which I don't want to get into terms, but there's something called codependency and stuff like that, which is what they had, not necessarily what you had, which gets confusing. But they had a need for you, it sounds like, to need them. So they what happens in that situation is they kind of like enable you to continue to not be so well, I'm putting that in quotes, so that you continue to need them, so that they can continue to show up and be your savior in a way, right? And that's all on them. And that's something that you should never have had to deal with as the client.
Yeah. So I mean I think this relationship was like one where I just really felt like all the attachment stuff from, when I was younger really just like kind of came to a head. And I think that again, it's the same thing. I always think back like what would I want to tell somebody else? Like if I saw them in a similar situation. And I just feel like it's important for people to know that how like attachment can manifest, and like what is going on for them when they feel these things. Because I didn't know, and I thought there was something wrong with me. Um, anyways, so fast forward.
Could I slow you down right here, because I think you have such an important message, and then we'll go to where you were just going. This is so tricky. Like, let's just break it down for a second. Like, at the end of the day, you're vulnerable. You're in a vulnerable position. You do have attachment needs that do need to be met in therapy, right? It's kind of very tricky. Like, there are people who think, okay, so just keep all attachment needs out of therapy and make therapy about something else, like whatever. I don't know. But like, why focus on the relationship? Why focus on the connection? I think what people don't understand is that you're not choosing to do that, and that it's just automatically being activated from your subconscious. All of the attachment wounding and needs that are there are going to get activated. And there's this powerful energy that shows up now in therapy that's automatic and not your fault, and has nothing to do with how you're showing up. You just show up and they're there. And the therapist job and role, it's all on the therapist to help you regulate around that, to help you learn what's safe, what's secure as an anchored present, and what's a healthy dependency that will lead to independence, right? Which is a very regular part of development that we have. You actually do depend on the therapist right now to a large degree, because if you didn't, you wouldn't need to go to therapy, right? So you do need their help to figure this out, and you need their connection to figure this out. You need to feel safe with them to figure this out. So, but the therapist's job is to be healthy and boundaried and clear and okay themselves, so that they can help you find your footing and help you learn how to work through this connection in order to find your own connection with yourself. And what happened was here clearly that the therapist's own stuff got in the way and actually took advantage of the parts of you that needed that connection, and really made you even more dysregulated, which again was not your fault. And you don't know how to steer this. You don't know how to take control of this in a way that feels steady. It's a therapist's role to do that, and they did not do that for you, which is so upsetting. And I'm really sorry that you went through that. And you said that you would like people to know about these things so that they know what they're getting themselves into. If you could, I know it's like off the top of your head for a second, but if we could just slow down for a minute, if you could send a message, a clear message to a client who is going to come into a therapist struggling with this type of disorganized attachment, what can they expect? uh what might you want to tell them about the shame that they might feel, about the messiness of the relationship, and what healthy therapy hopefully should look like? I hope you've been exposed to something healthier.
Yeah. So I think it can be complicated because, like, again, like with the therapist, like I remember I used to say to him, "I don't want to be this attached to you, and like I don't feel right about it. Like it just feels wrong." And he used to say, "In order to become detached, you have to attach first," and like all this like therapy language, so that it would be very confusing. But I would say that like if there's any part of your gut instinct that feels like this is maybe not right, like there's always someone out there that is right. Like I think for me it was like, oh, there's no one else. Like this is it. So I have to take it.
Mm,
But that's not true. And I know it's complicated because especially if you're attached, it's very hard to detach.
yeah.
But I
I was just going to say that, like, your therapist, the therapist they had, isn't wrong in what they're saying, but they're totally creating an enmeshment and not an attachment. And those are two very, very different things, right? It's true that we need to attach. Attachment just means it's a relationship. It's a close relationship. I mean, maybe there's other more sophisticated ways of defining it, but like it basically just means we're connected, right? And we do have to have some connection in order to heal, or and in order to become independent, of course. But what he's doing to you is really saying, like, you need me, and you need me outside of this therapy room. You need me in so many different kind of ways. And that's not attachment, even though he's calling it that. Let's be so clear, right? That's not attachment. Attachment's about proximity. And in order for a person to heal, it's not that they need more proximity to the therapist necessarily. Some people do need, like you said, twice a week or a double session or whatever. Okay, that makes sense. That might be needed for a time. But the idea that you need me close to you all the time, right, is something that's actually problematic, because even within development of a young child, the child separates from the mother, right? And the child has to, over time, obviously in the beginning, things are much closer, but over time, the child has to learn how to deal with the disappointment of that separation. And they come back to the security of the mother when the mother's there again, where they start to feel like they can explore the world. And this person's telling you, like, you can't explore the world. You'll never be able to. You have to only be with me. And that's the only way you'll get through this. And what we want to really be clear about is that yes, there's an element of that that's true, but that's a very absolute statement that's really, really dangerous and tricky, um, because it's not saying that we're also going to teach you how to be separate and feel like you're still connected to me. It's more like you're going to have to always be around me. Is that's like the flavor that I'm hearing.
Yeah, yeah. And that ended up playing out in a lot of different ways, like paying for my apartment and my car and different things
Oh,
that were very, obviously they were very bad for me, but also just very wrong. Um,
yeah. And again, like it's being framed as like this is your part of your healing, right? You struggle with avoidance, right? And not being able to depend on me. So let me teach you how to depend on me. Now that's not called dependence. That's not a way where we're gonna depend in a way where we can feel okay on our own. That's him coming to be your rescuer, your savior, where you don't have to struggle, like as opposed to like helping you build the muscle around the struggle through the attachment. And those are two very different things. But of course, you don't know the difference.
right.
Okay. So you were going to be fast forwarding to something that I
Oh,
slowed you down on. Sorry about that. Do you remember what it
no.
was?
I guess I was just going to go to the next part of my life.
Okay, sure.
Um,
Do you feel like we could, do you feel like there was, you explained this well, like people, the messaging you wanted people to have? I know that a big part of you being here, which is so brave, really, truly, really, really brave, is with the intention of helping people understand themselves, maybe hear things that they need to hear now, so that when they're in a situation that maybe mirrors some of the things that you're talking about here, they can really slow themselves down and maybe tune into some things that they wouldn't have known otherwise. So do you feel like you did that here so far?
I think mostly. I mean, I think it also doesn't just play out in like, I know I kind of am highlighting it in the therapy, like with my therapist, just because like that's what happened with me. But I think even like getting into marriages or any relationships really, like where this need to be connected or be attached can take over and become so strong that you just allow certain things that aren't good for you or aren't healthy. And I think just like knowing, like, I do have this need, but that doesn't mean I have to let go of things that are important to me. I don't have to let people treat me wrongly, and I don't have to be hurt or disrespected or abused because I need to be attached. And even though it sounds like simple when I'm saying it, it's so complicated when you're in it.
Yeah, of course.
I just think it's important to
Yeah.
have that awareness and just to know that.
Yes, because I think that what you're highlighting is in a lot of people's lived experience, the connection that they did get maybe came through like splitting away from their authenticity, like we said before. And like that's what they believe is the only way that they can get connection. And I can't just be myself with my imperfections, with my humanity, with my humanness, and the things that I struggle with, or the shame or pain that I have, and also be connected to is something that they don't know is possible. And I think you're trying to say, like, you don't have to move away from yourself and from who you are and become someone else in order to get connection, even though that's what your system might have learned.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a really important message. Yeah. So you were going to go to the next part of your life?
So yeah, so eventually I wanted to get married, um, and just like move on, you know. Um, I still,
Did you get out of this? I'm sorry to stop you. Just in the story, you got out of this relationship with your therapist. I imagine that was complicated. You don't have to go into it. I'm just,
yeah,
or were you still seeing them at this time?
I was still seeing them, but I got out of a
Okay.
certain part of the relationship that was happening that, you know,
Okay.
um, but I still found myself being so attached to them. and I got engaged, but like there was still this part of me, like obviously I was, very excited to be with my husband and like, um I was building this connection with my husband and loved him and everything, but I still felt like so attached to this therapist. And that was really, really difficult because I knew I was supposed to be attaching only to my husband. And like, even though this therapist, it wasn't like a romantic attachment, it was like an emotional thing, which sometimes felt worse because I'm like, I can't separate. And it was like very suffocating to me. Um, and it also just didn't really allow me to have, like the space I needed as a newlywed. And, anyways, um,
Were you able to, if I could ask, and you don't have to answer, were you able to notice this concern and bring it up in therapy? Was that something you were able to do?
so that's what I was going to say next. So I did bring it up,
Oh, okay.
and it was very dismissed. Like, therapists do these things with their clients, and, just not a big deal. So after that, I realized, what, there's something wrong. Like, that's not a normal response. And also, like, the whole premise of our relationship was like, oh, it's for my healing. And now you're saying, like, oh, it's just, you know, a normal whatever. So I ended up
Yeah.
finding,
Sorry to cut you off, but meaning that therapy should have facilitated where you can have a healthy romantic relationship with your partner, right? And now you're seeing in real time that you're not able to do that. And the therapist is saying, like, that's normal, that's fine, that's okay. So you're not really being heard and attuned to, you're being dismissed. And also you're seeing how you're not able to have healthy the type of attachment and connection that you would want with your partner.
right. So I ended up, I was like terrified to do this because I felt like I wasn't being loyal and, he did so much for me and married because he helped me heal so much and, all these things that he would tell me. But there was a part of me that I was like, I know that if I don't go to somebody else about this, like it's going to destroy me and I can't, it's not fair. So I ended up calling, finding a different therapist. And I didn't tell him that I was doing this, I just did it. So I went to
Wow.
this therapist and I was like, I have to talk about something that's like destroying me. And immediately she was like, this is abuse. And I'm like, I never thought about it like that. I was totally blindsided, you know? And
Like was there a part of you that was pushing back and being like, no, this isn't abuse?
I think I was just like in
Or were
shock.
you
And I
just
was like,
shocked? Total
yeah,
shock. Yeah.
yeah. I was just like, what?
Hmm.
Like, at first I was like, maybe she doesn't understand. Cause also, this again was like a lot of messaging that was fed to me. Like people aren't really going to understand. And I've been a therapist for 40 years and I've seen a lot of stuff and I know stuff. And then there's also like this guilt involved. Like, if people find out about certain things, like I could lose everything. And I never want to be
Oh,
responsible
that
for
was the
somebody.
messaging you were getting?
Yeah.
You
Like
were
that
getting
was,
that
he told
message
me,
also? Don't
he,
tell anyone.
yeah, he told me that straight out. Certain things.
Oh, so that's really important to highlight that that's something very problematic that people should know is when a therapist tells you don't share anything with anyone because it could get me in trouble. That's definitely a red flag, right? A therapist should be able to explain anything that they're doing at any time to someone, and it should make sense.
And also, I just want to say on top of that is that like when you're saying that in my mind, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's a red flag. But there's also an aspect of like when you're involved in something and when you're in a vulnerable position and it's explained to you in a certain way where it's like, okay, like I understand that makes sense. Like it's very hard to be like objective and be like, oh, this is a red flag. Because,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because you've again, right? We highlighted earlier that connection and attachment is the most important thing, and I can't live without it. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep this. And that's what really becomes the focus is everything else that I'm losing or that's happening to me is supposed to happen so that I can get this. And I don't believe that there's another way that I can be.
right.
Yeah. So what you're here telling everyone is like, no, there is another way. You can have safety, stability, you can have yourself and have attachment, which maybe people might find hard to believe because they're used to getting crumbs or they're used to getting abuse and they're not ready yet to confront that. But You want people to know you can have something way better.
Yeah. And also that there are certain things that are an absolute. Like in my mind at that time, I knew like, oh, this sounds weird. Like I shouldn't tell anyone. But I also felt like, oh, it makes sense. Like he knows what he's doing. He's been a therapist for 40 years or 30 years or whatever. And maybe there is room for, I guess, nuance or bending or whatever. But I feel like maybe if it, and again, maybe not, because maybe I was too attached, but like maybe if I knew, like, no, if someone tells you, you could ruin everything for me if this gets out, like automatically that's a no. And there's no ways around it. It's not like you can explain this or justify this in any way, no matter what. Yeah. Because I think there was a lot of justifying for me. It was like, oh, but this, oh, but that.
Like your system will come up with reasons, right, to keep this going because this is so powerful, and this is the connection that you've been needing so much. So it will come up with reasons that will feel okay or will feel like good enough to explain what's going on. And you're saying that might happen where you're going to start to explain this, but you want to be so clear, like this is an absolute full stop, like absolutely never okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So after this new therapist told me that, like this was abuse, I had obviously just a lot of feelings around it. Like, what, is it really? And like, I think after the shock wore off, this therapist was about to go on maternity leave. So I didn't end up staying with her for very long.
Mhm.
Um, but she did help me find somebody else after. And, you know, I just started dealing with just like the aftermath of everything. And eventually I did end everything. I did say, like, I can't have anything to do with you. And it was very hard because he was paying for my
Wow.
rent at the time. And,
Wow.
um, but,
Wow. That is such a difficult thing to do. And
you
how,
know,
if I could ask, like, did he just take that easily and like, yeah, okay, it makes sense? Or was there still like a lot of pushing back?
in the beginning, when I first said like, okay, like I did it very like slowly. It wasn't like well, it's a kind of a complicated situation. I basically said like, you know, I'm not going to come for sessions anymore. And like I said, he was still paying for my rent and there were still things that kept me attached to him. And at first he was like, explaining things like this is what I meant, like, this is what was meant to happen. And this is not really how it is. And the way you're describing it isn't really accurate. And trying not he didn't deny anything outright, but it was like this was for your healing. This was for your healing, and that was like the hill he was gonna die on. Like that was, and then I said, like, but it hurt me, and like, no, it wasn't meant to hurt you. Like just different, I guess, excuses. Um, and it took me a long time too. But then at a certain point, something came to head without getting into too many details, where everything had to be full, like cold turkey.
Yeah.
Um, which
Wow. And then to go from that to not having it at all has its
yeah,
own, like, that's so difficult.
it was very difficult. It was a very, very difficult time. Um, but there was also, I mean, there was also a lot going on in my life at that time. I had a parent that was dying and, you know, young children, and it was very chaotic. Um, so I don't think I really was able to deal with it fully until a few years later. Like I think I just had to like put it to the side and it's not something you ever stop dealing with as far as I know. But um yeah, like I think obviously, like, I don't want to scare anyone, and this is a situation where, like, attachment, I think, just gone wrong almost. Like, I don't think that this is how attachment problems play out for everyone, but I do feel like at the root of a lot of it was this lack of awareness.
Yeah. And like you're saying, even with awareness, that pull could be so strong. It still could be so difficult. I think maybe like a message that could be so hopeful is that if you hear a story like Leah's and you can see those dynamics, maybe they don't have the same extreme, situation that you're describing, or maybe some people do, and they're hearing this and feeling like there's a way out. But even if not, just the feelings of shame and pain and things like that that are coming up. And we have an awareness now, and now you're sensing that you're in a problematic relationship with someone who's taking advantage. Like, what if you can have that awareness here and also know that there are people who can help? Like the same way that you went to someone else who can give you such clarity. When you're in such a situation like you're describing, you can't be clear. It's not possible to be clear. And you're going to tell yourself things and feel the pull of the relationship, and just slowing yourself down and going to get another opinion from someone else, or just to talk it out with someone, um, a professional who really understands dynamics and attachment and what it's supposed to look like, would be something that could be so beneficial, and someone will take you seriously. People will take you seriously. It's so hard when the person that you're relying on, the therapist, isn't taking you seriously. You might believe, and maybe other people haven't, and you might believe that no one will, but you were believed in the end, and somebody helped you through that, or help you get clarity to get out of there.
Yeah. And
That's
I think
so important.
especially with somebody in a position of power, things can get very confusing. And I know for me that I felt like this sounds crazy right now, but like I felt like I'm the only person in the world that like something like this happened to, and like what is wrong with me? Like why? Obviously there's a
Mhm.
lot of feelings, but that like if there is anyone that is in a position where there's somebody that has authority over them in any way, it doesn't have to be a therapist, it could be a rabbi, it could be a teacher, whatever, that I'm
Could be a
sure there's
spouse.
somebody.
It could,
Yeah,
huh, right? And it
true.
can be just a family member. Yeah. Yeah.
Could be anyone.
That's a
That's the
very,
point.
very powerful force. Yeah, of course. And especially when you add the authority piece where you come in a vulnerable
Yeah,
state and you kind of relying on them for help, right? Um, that's where, if they're not okay, if the other person is not okay, that's where things can get very, very difficult.
yeah,
And it's so tricky because, like, we don't know. And, like, it's so risky in a way, right? Or not in a way, it is so risky in the system. And to shed your vulnerability, or to like expose your vulnerability and just put yourself out there and just be in the hands of someone else is so, so scary. Especially if they're not okay, you could get really hurt. So what would you recommend to someone dealing with this who does need help and does need to rely on somebody? How do you recommend they might approach that in terms of, like, maybe how to get that help, or how to, like, lean into it in a way that is safe or can be safe over time? Any
so I think
suggestions?
one of the things for me was that I felt like I couldn't be without this, and like how am I going to get out of this? But if you just think about, you know what, don't get out of this, like stay in this, but also see if there's someone else. Like you don't have to tell that person that you're going to see somebody else, and you could just go to somebody else in the meantime. And I think if you have
Mm.
the knowledge that there is somebody else, it may make it a bit easier to like break off from that or to see that for what it is. But if you feel like this is it for you, then it's going to feel like it's impossible to do anything about it. And I think one of the things is like you feel so alone. And I know for myself, like I would hear people's stories and people would be like, you're not alone, you're not alone. And at the end of it, I'd always be like, yeah, but I am alone. Cause like my story's different and like they don't get this particular or whatever. But there there is always something else and someone else. Always.
Wow, that is a really important message to hear, when you believe that there is nothing else, there is no one else, and maybe that I can never find that. Even if it's out there, it's not for me. Like, because look at my life, look at the relationships I've been in. This doesn't happen to other people, because who talks about these things, right? Most people tend to keep these things to themselves. But for them to hear that, like, there's other options, and especially you're like kind of sharing, like, to kind of what could feel like a betrayal to the client, to like go find someone else to talk to, which could in itself be quite complicated. You're kind of giving them permission to like, if you're feeling like something's off and not okay, go ahead and get another opinion and feel out another type of relationship. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, thank you. We're running out of time, so I just want to check with you. Is there any closing messages, anything you want to make sure you cover before we end?
Um, Not really. I mean, I think I kind of said most of what I wanted to say. I mean, again, I think maybe it's just important to like reiterate, you know, where attachment can get fuzzy and like to know that like what's okay and what's not okay. Um, because even in healthy relationships, a lot of times it can feel not okay and it can feel unhealthy, you know?
That's right. And you're uh like wired in a way where you're not even sure like what's okay and what's not, because all types of all types of pain or rejection or connection can get blended, and like we don't know which ones are okay and which ones aren't, so we really need to slow ourselves down, get other support, and it's out there. There's like a part of me that's just thinking about like how this word attachment is like I don't know, like it's almost become scary or something when it's supposed to be something that's like so safe and soothing, right? And really can be. Yeah, no, it's not from you. It's really just like it really is so scary, right? Because we've had lived experience and learned a lot around what it can feel like. And it's very hard to imagine a world where it's something that's stable and safe. Because even healthy relationships come with a lot of pain and a lot of letdown and connection, and really nice connection, which we can't necessarily trust and take in as something that's safe because, wait, is this a blurry boundary? Wait, is this, and it could just be like care and kindness. And it's like really nuanced and really, really tricky. So I really appreciate that you're sharing your story with so much highlighting like these nuances, because like there's a lot that's obvious, right? That you're describing as like red flag, full stop, and then there's like the trickiness of the gray, and like what is that? Is that kindness? Is that care? Is that healing? Or is that something that's now going to take me down a road to something that's much more problematic? I think if I could say, and I would love to hear your thoughts, bringing that to the therapist while it's happening is really, really important. And to really hear back, like, is the therapist hearing me? Are they helping me feel seen in my concern? Even if they're saying, this is appropriate, but like, do they hear my concern? Do they make room for it? Is it something that they're tuned into and care about? And are they checking on it from time to time? Are they checking on like, how's this relationship feeling to you? What's going on for you? And tell me how far away or how close I might need to be right now or something like that. Because I think you were signaling things like that. And they were like, no, you got to come to me. You got to come closer and closer. And just bringing it to the therapist and gauging how they respond, you should be able to feel heard, understood, like your feelings are important, your voice matters, you're not being dismissed, shamed, or blamed, and not just being told, just accept this just because this is how it's supposed to be. It really should be something that is gonna that you feel okay with over time as well. And when you're constantly like bringing it up and then feeling bad about it and being dismissed for that and just going along with it, that's a pattern that we need to take a second look at. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But I do also think it's important to highlight, like what I said before, about certain things being a full stop, no matter what they say, even if they make you feel heard, even if they make you feel understood, like, yeah, I see what you mean, but this is why this is okay. And like, because you're vulnerable,
Yeah.
that can, it can be very confusing. And like, then you can just believe it. But I think, yeah, I would just
So
highlight that also.
Could we summarize the full stop? There was the like, you can't live without me. That's like a full stop, right? I think that was one of them. I think another one was someone taking care of your personal life outside of the therapeutic relationship, whether it's paying for things for you, and things like that. I feel like I remember there was also something else there, but I can't remember it offhand this second. But if you do,
If they
let me know.
say nobody will understand this because
Right. Nobody will understand this. Don't share this with anyone.
Don't
Let's
share
keep
this.
this between us. Yeah, that's something that's definitely a full stop.
And obviously any physical
Right.
contact. I mean, hugs, I don't know. People have different feelings about that.
Right.
But
That gets a little complicated. Right.
besides for that,
Right.
you know,
Right.
I'm saying obvious, but to me, there were so many things that were convinced that it wasn't obvious after a while, you know? So I think
Yeah.
that's important to note.
Yeah. That's right. It stops becoming obvious. Your own senses start to like feel confusing. They start to like question you, and you don't even know if you could trust how you feel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That is so important. Leah, thank you so much. I am so grateful for you for coming on. This is such a personal, deeply personal story to you that I imagine you would prefer to keep in a very deep place inside of yourself and not have to like come out and share with the world. And I know that you shared with me that, like, as hard as this is, it's something that you hope can really help other people so that they're not put in the same type of position or have to feel the feelings that you had to feel. So thank you so much. And I'm so glad you came on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for listening to this conversation. If something in this episode resonated with you, especially if you've ever felt confused about an attachment or unsure about something in a relationship or even in therapy, it's really important to pay attention to that. Not everything that feels intense is unsafe, but not everything that feels like connection is actually safe either. And sometimes just having another perspective, even one conversation, like that one conversation that Leah was ultimately able to have, it can help you to start to understand what's happening in a different way. If this episode felt meaningful, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've ever felt like you have a story to share, but weren't sure how, there are ways to do that safely like we did in this episode. Also, you can find a link in the show notes to leave feedback on this episode or any of our other episodes. Thank you, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to the HIP podcast. If you found these stories meaningful, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can learn more about our work at the HIP Counseling Center by visiting www.hipcounseling.com and stay connected with us on social media for updates and more conversations about healing and growth. Until next time, remember, humanly is possible.